The garden is nearly silent now. Not from absence, but fullness, like a song that's come to rest on its final note, echoing gently in the soul. You're still beneath the fig tree, wrapped in shadow and starlight, your breath moving in time with the rustle of leaves. Everything has changed. And nothing has. You rise slowly, your body still drowsy from the rhythm of the garden. Around you, life continues, not urgently, not loudly, but with calm certainty. A fox slips between tall grasses. A vine stretches toward a lantern someone forgot to light. In the crookedness, peace has bloomed. You wander. The stone path meanders now, no longer a grid, but a conversation. It leads you past the grove of uncertain trees, past the messy rose bushes and the poetry-painted wall. You hear whispers of laughter. A fountain burps. Somewhere, Millanax is singing a duet with a sleeping owl. You reach the place where you planted your seed. It's still just a patch of dirt. But the soil is warm. The moonlight falls unevenly here, splitting into jagged shapes as it passes through branches above. You sit beside the small mound, pressing your hand gently into the earth. You don't expect anything. But you hope. Hera arrives once more. No words. Just her presence, cool and soft as moonlight. She kneels beside the seed, resting a hand near yours. Her fingers trace the cracks in the dirt, as if listening for something deeper than sound. After a moment, she speaks. When I was young, she says softly, I thought order was the only way to keep the world from falling apart. You glance at her. And now? She shrugs. Now I think the world was never meant to be held together. Just witnessed. Encouraged. The silence that follows is comfortable. Like old friends sitting through the credits of a long, strange, wonderful film. I still like straight lines, she admits. I still like messy ones, you reply. Good. And that's all that needs to be said. The fig tree sways behind you. Not in the wind, there is none, but in memory. In rhythm. In promise. Shellos approaches, slow and steady. He places a small pebble beside the mound of your seed. Not for decoration. Just for presence. Dionysus arrives last, carrying a lantern with no candle. Let's see what it lights anyway, he says, setting it beside the seed and sitting cross-legged like a child waiting for story time. Zephyr hovers above, scattering petals that have no pattern. Millanax arrives late, tripping over a root and landing in your lap. Frank IV has gone missing, he declares. Then, noticing the solemn mood, he whispers, oh. Ceremony time. You all sit. Around the seed. Around each other. Not asking it to grow. Just being with it. Letting it choose its moment. Letting it know it's safe. And then, as night deepens and the stars lean in, a whisper lifts from the soil. Not sound. Not light. Just presence. The seed stirs. You don't cheer. You don't shout. You just place your hand over the earth and say, take your time. Everyone stays for a while longer. Then, one by one, they drift off turtle, satyr, goddess, and god back into their corners of the unplanned, perfectly imperfect garden. You lie back once more beneath the fig tree, its branches weaving stars into your dreams. You are not waiting. You are with. The garden breathes. The seed listens. And all is well. Wind down, 300 words, so now, the garden sleeps. The vines rest in their gentle tangles. The fountains whisper with soft, uneven trickles. The fig tree above you holds its strange, asymmetrical shape like a lullaby written in branches. You feel your breath matching the rhythm of the earth beneath you. Slow. Deep. Unhurried. Somewhere far off, a night bird sings. Not on beat. Not on cue. Just when it feels like singing. The stars overhead have scattered across the sky like spilled glitter, no constellations tonight. Just a mess of twinkles. Each one shining in its own direction. You close your eyes. In your pocket, the memory of a seed still glows faintly. A promise without deadline. A question without anxiety. Just potential. You feel the presence of the others still near, not hovering, not clinging, just nearby. A turtle's breath. A satyr's giggle. A goddess's sigh. A fig falling somewhere in the dark. The garden no longer asks anything of you. It simply allows. You breathe in. And out. The air is sweet with soil and leaves and quiet. There's nothing to fix. Nothing to prove. Only this moment. And this breath. And this crooked, sacred world that welcomes you, exactly as you are. So sleep, dear one. Let the vines curl. Let the stars shift. Let the seed grow, in its own strange way. You've done enough. You are enough. You are home. Hey guys, tonight we wander into a place where not a single petal is allowed to lean left, where every leaf must mirror its twin, and a blade of grass growing at an uneven angle is cause for divine intervention. Welcome to Hera's garden, a paradise of perfect proportion, and a waking nightmare for any free-spirited fern. You arrive not with thunder or ceremony, but in the soft hush of twilight. The marble pathways beneath your feet are flawlessly polished, each tile laid in an exact checkerboard of alternating white and gold. Statues of swans, placed in mirror image pairs, peer down at you as if silently judging the asymmetry of your footsteps. The air is thick with the perfume of heliotrope, mathematically spaced at 10-petal intervals. Somewhere, a lyre plays a tune so balanced you suspect the notes are arranged by compass and ruler. And you probably won't survive this. If you have even a hint of creative chaos in your soul, you're in grave danger of being pruned for lack of symmetry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Always curious who's out there in the dark with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into the garden, brushing past rose bushes that have been sculpted into perfect Fibonacci spirals. You don't dare sneeze in case the sound echoes unevenly off the hedge walls. This, dear listener, is where Hera, Queen of the Gods, spends her quieter hours, not plotting revenge, not crafting marital curses, but refining her plants into paragons of aesthetic balance. You spot her near the center of the garden, a regal figure in flowing silver robes, standing beside a sapling. The tree is innocent enough, a young fig with only a few branches, still learning how to hold itself upright. But Hera stares at it like it's personally insulted her. One twig leans ever so slightly out of alignment with the others. It's a crime in this realm. She kneels, yes, the goddess kneels, and uses a golden measuring rod to assess the angle of each branch. A delicate frown appears on her otherwise flawless face. This one tilts, she whispers. Now, you may ask, did ancient Greeks actually obsess over symmetry this way? Well, kind of. The Greeks were huge fans of mathematical proportions. Temples like the Parthenon were designed using the golden ratio. Even sculptures of humans aimed for perfect balance, with left and right sides harmonizing in idealized form. But no historical record suggests Hera had a horticultural vendetta. Still, mythology isn't known for restraint, and tonight, it's best to simply accept that the Queen of Olympus has decided to create a perfectly symmetrical tree. No exceptions. No excuses. Just flawless form. It's worth noting, historians still argue whether ancient gardens were truly symmetrical or just artistically depicted that way. Roman villas loved a good topiary, but Greek gardens may have leaned more rustic. This, of course, hasn't stopped modern documentaries from zooming in on every hedge like it holds the secrets of the universe. As Hera continues to tinker with her sapling, a pair of nymphs arrive, dressed in moss-green tunics, carrying tiny shears and scrolls of geometric diagrams. They bow, and one announces, "Your Highness, the petal division has completed the mirror plot for Quadrant C." "Excellent," Hera replies, without looking up. "We'll implement it after this tree stops disobeying." You stare at the tree. It looks nervous. You're not sure how, but it definitely looks like it's trying not to breathe too loudly. You wander to a nearby bench, of course, centered exactly between two matching lily ponds, and watch the scene unfold. Occasionally, a breeze dares to ruffle the leaves in an unsanctioned direction. Hera sighs. The nymphs scribble furiously. You start to suspect that designing a perfectly symmetrical tree may not be a reasonable goal. But then again, who's going to tell Hera? As you sit, you notice something unusual in the soil beneath your feet. There's a soft humming sound. You crouch and brush away the dirt to reveal thin golden threads, running beneath the garden like invisible veins. They pulse faintly, feeding divine order into every root and stem. Apparently, even the underground systems here are regulated. Suddenly, a dove lands beside you. It has an olive branch in its beak. One that splits into two twigs at precisely equal angles. It drops the branch, stares at you as if to say, "This isn't a place for improvisers," and flies off. You lean back and let your gaze drift upward. Even the clouds above the garden form symmetrical patterns, two swirls left, two swirls right, with a sunbeam slicing down the center like nature's own protractor. And just when you think it can't get any more meticulous, a marble plaque nearby lights up and whispers, "Please refrain from disturbing the hedges. They are emotionally delicate." You don't dare move. And yet, despite all this order, you can't help but feel a little restless. Somewhere inside, you sense that the fig tree does too. It's young, full of life, and already bending just slightly away from perfection. Hera's frown deepens. She'll need help, and not the usual kind. She's about to assemble a team of mythological landscapers whose credentials range from forest dwelling to terribly unqualified. But that, you'll soon discover, is a whole saga of its own. The tree, bless its little bark heart, doesn't mean to misbehave. It's just a tree. It doesn't read blueprints. It doesn't consult ancient Greek design principles before unfurling a leaf. It simply grows, leaning toward the sun, curving where it must. But to Hera, every deviation is a declaration of war. A war against beauty. Against order. Against her divine vision. She circles the sapling like a hawk inspecting a doodle someone made on the edge of her marble scrolls. With a delicate snap of her fingers, a breeze pauses in midair. The chirping of birds halts as though put on trial. Hera crouches, peers at a single slightly crooked offshoot, and scowls with the intensity of a Spartan war general. You perch nearby, trying not to shift your weight too loudly. The whole garden feels like it's holding its breath. "Bring me the committee," Hera declares, standing tall and radiant. Now, if you're wondering, no, there is no mention in classical myth of Hera employing an actual committee of divine landscapers. But we're working in dream logic now, where gods can hire whoever they like and job descriptions include branch equilibrium supervisor. Within minutes, the committee arrives. It is not what you expect. First comes Aglaia, one of the Graces, holding a bouquet of perfectly identical lilies, each bloom measured to the millimeter. She believes beauty must never surprise. Her motto, symmetry is serenity. Then there's Melanax, a minor satyr with a wooden clipboard, ivy in his beard, and the permanently puzzled expression of someone who wandered into a math exam thinking it was a wine tasting. He was likely appointed for diversity. Next comes Shellos, a sea turtle inexplicably hired as the curvature consultant. Shellos slides along a tiny golden cart, eyes blinking slowly, wearing a monocle. He may not talk much, but when he does, it's in riddles about spirals. "Balance," Shellos murmurs now, examining the tree's uneven branch, "is not when all is even, but when all feels even." Hera does not look impressed. And finally, Zephyr, a wind nymph with a wild mane of hair, who believes trees should grow however they please, as long as they write poems about it afterward. She's already scribbling verses in the dirt with her toe. "A bend is a story," she hums. "A leaf's defiance is a sigh of the soul." Hera sighs too, but not dreamily. More like someone being forced to watch someone else use Comic Sans. You sit on the grass and watch the debate unfold. The committee circles the tree, offering opinions, sketches, and occasionally snacks. Aglaia proposes trimming. Zephyr wants to let it self-actualize. Melanax suggests scaffolding made of licorice wood, which no one addresses. Shellos just hums and nudges a rock into place. It's chaos, beautiful, gentle chaos. Meanwhile, you take a moment to admire the surrounding garden. While Hera obsesses over her tree, the rest of the garden is a mosaic of floral perfection. Or at least, it tries to be. Look closer, and you notice tiny rebellions, a vine curling the wrong way, a sunflower growing taller than its symmetrical twin. Nature's quiet protest. You smirk, and nature smirks back. You learn something curious: ancient Greek temples and city layouts were heavily influenced by symmetry, but their gardens? Far less documented. Historians still argue whether Greek gardens leaned more geometric, like later Roman ones, or stayed wild and untamed. There's evidence of structured courtyards, sure, but also tales of Dionysian groves where everything grew drunken sideways. Back at the tree, Aglaia is drawing a proposed symmetry grid on a chalkboard made of moonstone. Each branch must mirror its neighbor precisely, she says, tapping with a silver pointer. Zephyr blows the chalk dust into the air and declares, "Trees don't care about blueprints." Shellos lifts one slow flipper and adds, "Perfection is a circle, not a line." And Melanax, bless him, is now balancing two pairs on his horns and calling it fruit-based design alignment. You glance over at Hera. Her jaw twitches slightly. This may not be the dream team she hoped for. But here's the thing, the tree is watching too. Or at least, it feels like it is. And maybe, just maybe, it's taking all this in. Because you absolutely swear, one of its branches just straightened by a fraction of an inch. Progress, Hera says, eyes gleaming. Fear, you mutter under your breath. Suddenly, a bell chimes. Not a real bell, more like a golden vibration in the air, signaling the arrival of someone even more opinionated than the goddess of marriage. Dionysus. He bursts onto the scene like a chaotic wine stain on a white tablecloth, grape juice sloshing, ID crown askew, wearing sandals that don't match. He's trailed by a pomegranate bouncing behind him like a mischievous dog. "My dear sister," he cries. "Still trying to wrestle nature into submission, are we? Trees don't wear corsets, you know." Hera sighs again, deeper this time. The kind of sigh that plants wither under. But Dionysus grins, plucks a crooked fig from the sapling, bites into it, and adds, "Delicious. Because it's a little wrong." He winks at you, juice dribbling down his chin. And just like that, the fight between order and chaos is officially underway. Dionysus leans against a perfectly symmetrical trellis and knocks it slightly off-center with his elbow, just to see what happens. A vine recoils in horror. Somewhere, Aglaia gasps as if a child has drawn outside the lines. Symmetry, he declares with theatrical disdain, is just a cage with matching walls. You, still cross-legged in the grass, tilt your head and consider that maybe, just maybe, this wine-drenched chaos deity has a point. The garden has started to feel tense. Like everything's trying too hard. Even the clouds have stopped drifting, probably afraid of asymmetrical puffing. Hera raises a single brow. "Dionysus. You weren't summoned." "No," he beams, sipping from a cup that definitely wasn't there a moment ago. "But I brought figs." He tosses one toward Shellos, who doesn't move, but somehow the fruit lands gently in the turtle's lap anyway. Shellos blinks once. Maybe in gratitude. Maybe in quiet judgment. The committee stands frozen. Aglaia glares. Melanax offers Dionysus a clipboard. Zephyr is already sketching him in charcoal, captioned "Wine God, Wild Pose." You suspect she has a crush. Dionysus ignores them all and approaches the tree. He squints at it, walks around twice, then pulls out a golden fork and pokes the trunk. "It's overthinking it," he says, as if the tree is a nervous actor auditioning for a tragic play. "It's a tree," Hera hisses through clenched teeth. "It's a metaphor," Dionysus replies. "Everything's a metaphor if you squint hard enough." You smile despite yourself. He's infuriating, but undeniably right. Trees are messy. Life is messy. And this one, despite its divine micromanagement, is still growing how it wants. Hera snaps her fingers and conjures a hovering chalkboard labeled branch ratios, updated. "We will achieve visual harmony," she declares. "Even if we must redesign the very laws of botany." "Ah yes," Dionysus says, flopping onto a mossy rock, because nothing says divine grace like a tree with performance anxiety. You start to wonder how ancient Greeks really felt about all this. There are hints that their gardens weren't just for beauty, they were symbolic, philosophical even. Plato's academy had groves for walking and thinking. Aristotle taught under trees. Nature wasn't only something to shape, it was something to converse with. But even so, historical records don't mention divine gardening committees or passive-aggressive turtles. That's part of the joy, isn't it? Here, in the sleepy dream space of bedtime myth, you get to imagine what history left out. Back at the sapling, a compromise seems briefly possible. Dionysus suggests letting every other branch go rogue, like some kind of botanical mullet, order in the front, party in the back. Hera pretends not to hear him. Shellos slowly creeps up to the base of the tree. He places his flipper on the trunk and murmurs something in a language made of sighs and silence. No one moves. Even the breeze pauses to listen. The tree twitches. A small bud opens, a perfectly balanced pair of leaves, symmetrical to the micron. Hera's eyes widen in joy. Then, right above it, a new shoot bursts out wildly at a diagonal angle. Hera's smile vanishes. Zephyr-Ella applauds. Dionysus throws confetti made of pomegranate seeds. Melanax drops his clipboard and starts dancing in a circle, chanting something about chaotic neutral foliage. You lean back, your eyelids starting to feel heavy from all this divine gardening drama. The ground beneath you is warm, the kind of warm that hums gently into your bones. The fig tree, now sporting one perfectly aligned bud and one rebellious sprig, looks more alive than ever. It's no longer a symbol. It's just a tree. Hera, however, is not done. She straightens her robe, brushes imaginary dirt from her sleeves, and announces, clearly, we must return to fundamentals. We must re-establish the divine parameters of growth. Oh good, Dionysus groans, sipping again. Nothing puts a plant at ease like divine parameters. Shellos coughs, a sound like the soft snapping of old parchment, and unrolls a scroll. On it are sketches of spirals, branches, and geometric patterns that would make a mathematician cry. Fibonacci, Shellos says reverently. We must Fibonacci the entire garden. Historians still argue whether the Fibonacci sequence was actually used in ancient Greek art and architecture. Some claim it's a modern myth, a retrofitted pattern placed on the past like stencils on spilled wine. But the sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 is undeniably seductive. Spirals appear everywhere in nature: pine cones, nautilus shells, sunflower seeds. The universe seems to favor elegant chaos. Hera seizes on the idea. Yes. Spiral balance. Natural symmetry. Shellos nods slowly. But only if the tree agrees. The tree, for its part, remains unbothered. It grows, tilts, curves. You watch a small vine near its base loop in a perfect Fibonacci arc. Then another veers sideways for no reason at all. Progress, Shellos intones again. Regression, Hera mutters. Art, says Zephyr-Ella, eyes dreamy. I need more wine, Dionysus adds. As evening deepens, golden fireflies begin to flit through the garden. They, too, move in pairs. Or at least they try to zip off on their own, breaking formation, leaving symmetrical patterns half done in the dusk. You lie back in the grass. Above you, stars start to peek out, two here, two there, then one awkward one hanging a little to the left. Maybe Hera hates it. Maybe she doesn't notice. But either way, it feels like the sky is on your side. And the tree? It's still growing. Still reaching. Not perfectly. But steadily. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's enough. The next morning, though time flows loosely in the gardens of the gods, you wake to the sound of measured footsteps and leaves being chastised. Hera has summoned a class. Not a casual meeting. Not a gentle workshop. A full, formal, absolutely mandatory symmetry school. You're handed a pamphlet titled Introduction to Harmonized Horticulture, Level 1. The table of contents includes basic twig geometry, leaf axis alignment, and an ominous chapter called When Roots Rebel. You sigh and follow the marble path to the open-air classroom. It's nestled between two identical rows of cedar trees, each trimmed to within a leaf's width of perfection. A vine chalkboard floats midair, and chairs made of polished stone and unyielding disappointment await you and the other attendees: nymphs, dryads, bored-looking satyrs, and one very sleepy cyclops in reading glasses. Hera steps up to the front, carrying a stick. Not a pointer, but an actual golden twig she uses like a conductor's baton. "Welcome," she says, "to the first day of divine discipline." Symmetry isn't just pleasing, it is necessary. You suppress a yawn. The Cyclops doesn't. He yawns so wide a bird accidentally flies in. The lecture begins. You learn about mirror symmetry, radial balance, and the aesthetic importance of a well-placed fern. Hera gestures to illustrations of leaves, each labeled with angles, lengths, and something called petiole compliance scoring. No one dares ask questions. Even Shellos, who you assumed had tenure here, is quietly taking notes. And then comes the hands-on section. Literally. Each student receives a miniature fig tree sapling in a clay pot. You're instructed to prune, balance, and measure it according to divine proportions. There's a checklist. There's a ruler shaped like Apollo's jawline. There's a whisper of despair in the air. You take your tiny shears and glance at your assigned tree. It already looks anxious. "Sorry, buddy," you murmur, and start trimming. A few seats down, Zeffirella has thrown out her ruler and begun sculpting her sapling into a swan-shaped poem titled Windswept Yearning. Aglaia looks horrified. Melanax has glued googly eyes to his pot and named it Frank. Shellos, somehow, is using no tools at all, just slow, thoughtful touches. His tree bends gently beneath his flipper, adjusting itself as if soothed by turtle wisdom. Hera, of course, circles like a strict professor. She pauses behind each participant, nods once or raises a disapproving eyebrow. When she reaches your pot, she studies the angle of one branch and raises her golden twig. "Asymmetry in Sector 4, she says. You apologize to the branch. It does not respond. Here's a historical side note to amuse yourself with while pretending to measure leaf curvature. The Greeks, in their temples and sculptures, did value symmetry, but they also believed in dynamic balance. That meant a pose or layout could appear balanced through movement, not just through rigid mirroring. Think of a statue with one leg forward, one arm bent, the parts in tension creating harmony. Historians still argue whether this dynamic balance came from intuition or formal theory. The answer likely varies by artist, and by how much wine was involved. Which brings us, inevitably, to Dionysus. He's not in the class. Of course not. He's outside the garden wall, coaxing vines to grow into chaotic spirals and giving impromptu lectures on aesthetic anarchy. From your seat, you can just glimpse him dancing in the background, his fig tree growing in every direction at once and thriving. At some point, a gust of wind carries in the scent of crushed grapes and cinnamon, and Zeffirella sighs, "He's more of a curriculum than this curriculum." You glance back at your tree. Despite your careful trimming, it seems unhappy. One leaf has curled dramatically, like it's fainting from existential stress. Another points defiantly sideways, rejecting your ruler entirely. You think of that one spiral Shellos showed earlier. It curved not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Maybe that's the real lesson here. But Hera doesn't see it that way. She steps forward and draws a glowing diagram in the air, a golden ratio spiral overlaying your tree's branches. Most of them don't fit. Her frown deepens. Then, a miracle, one new bud appears at the top, exactly where the spiral predicts. The room gasps. Hera's eyes flash with pride. Then, of course, a second bud pops out just beside it, slightly lower and wildly off ratio. The Cyclops laughs first. A deep, warm, wheezing sound. Then Zeffirella. Then Melanax's googly-eyed Frank topples off the table with a clatter, and suddenly the whole class dissolves into giggles, some trying not to, others letting the laughter tumble out like loose flower petals. Even you laugh, quietly, sleepily. Hera does not. She waves a hand and dismisses the class. Clearly, she mutters, more advanced methods are needed. You and the others trickle away, leaving your saplings behind. As you go, you catch one last glimpse of your tree. The misbehaving leaf is now joined by two more, forming an off-center triangle that somehow feels joyful. Like it's winking at you. You feel yourself begin to relax. Maybe order isn't the same as peace. Maybe beauty isn't something to impose, it's something to notice. And as the sun begins to dip, casting warm gold across the garden's once perfect lines, you find a spot beneath the original fig tree, the one Hera's been fixated on. You lie back in the grass, its uneven canopy casting uneven shadows, and let your thoughts drift. The birds start chirping again. The breeze resumes its casual dance. Somewhere behind you, Shellos murmurs, "Let the leaf decide." And for the first time all day, nothing feels out of place. You wake again, if you ever truly slept, to the subtle rhythm of grapes being crushed somewhere nearby and the lazy flap of a linen sleeve in the wind. Dionysus has returned, this time reclining on a couch made of ivy in questionable motivation, sipping from a goblet and watching Hera with the amused detachment of someone who has absolutely no stake in the outcome. Hera, meanwhile, is staring at a tree like it's a riddle that personally insulted her geometry teacher. Every angle, she murmurs to herself, must answer to beauty. You stretch your arms and glance around. The rest of the garden is in recovery mode. The nymphs look exhausted, their tiny shears drooping. Melanax is lying on the grass whispering compliments to Frank, who now has a daisy tucked into his googly eye socket. Zeffirella has painted a mural of crooked trees on a nearby wall titled "The Wind's Intent." But Hera? She's doubling down. She waves her hand, and with a swirl of golden light, a scroll appears in midair. On it are exact measurements, angles, and ratios, a blueprint, not for the tree, but for how to think about trees. She's moving beyond gardening now. She's designing principles, philosophies, maybe even divine laws. Dionysus groans. You're weaponizing the golden ratio. And truly, she is. The golden spiral appears again, this time hovering in front of you like a divine nautilus. Hera overlays it on the tree with a flick of her fingers. The branches shimmer and shift slightly to conform. For a moment, the tree looks almost perfect. Almost. Because then a single leaf twitches, as if sneezing in protest, and the entire illusion crumples. You stifle a laugh. Dionysus doesn't. You can't strong-arm beauty, he says. You've got to flirt with it. Order is not oppression, Hera replies coldly. And chaos is not always corruption, he counters, toasting the tree with his goblet. Sometimes it's just freedom and sandals. And here comes your history snack, the golden ratio, also called the divine proportion. Has been used for centuries in art and architecture. From the Parthenon to the pyramids to your math-anxious nightmares, it's said to represent the most aesthetically pleasing proportion known to humankind. But historians still argue whether the Greeks actually used it intentionally, or whether we're just seeing patterns we desperately want to be their symmetry imposed after the fact. Which feels a lot like what Hera's doing right now. She snaps her fingers. The air hums. Marble columns rise around the tree in a perfect circle, 12 of them, equidistant, echoing the structure of a zodiac. Shellos watches quietly from the pond's edge, his eyes reflecting the symmetry. I present, Hera declares, the axis arborum, the tree of balance. It is magnificent. The tree is centered within the marble ring, its limbs aligned, its trunk gently curved in accordance with sacred math. Vines have been braided like the folds of a statue's robes. At a glance, it is flawless. And yet, you walk around it slowly. The grass beneath your feet crunches gently. A breeze moves through the columns. And then you notice there, at the back of the tree, tucked where no one seems to be looking, is a knot. A gnarled, natural twist in the bark. Not symmetrical. Not measured. Just honest. You touch it, and the bark feels warm like a sleeping heartbeat. Zeffirella walks up beside you. She thinks perfection will bring peace, she says softly, but the tree only grows when it forgets what it's supposed to be. You nod. You're starting to feel it too, that strange tension between design and desire. Between what looks perfect and what feels alive. Mellanax joins you, holding Frank upside down and whispering, "Sometimes my roots just want to dance." Shallows, from his mossy perch, adds, "Symmetry calms the eye. Asymmetry awakens the soul." Even Dionysus, who's now balancing his wine cup on his nose, pauses and murmurs, "The best fig I ever ate was so lopsided it looked like a smirk." You take a step back and look at the Axis arboreum again. Yes, it's lovely. But it's not quite joyful. Then Hera, with all the dignity of an eternal queen who just realized the math isn't mateing, takes a deep breath. Her shoulders drop just slightly. She touches the gnarled knot you found. And for a moment, her lips part in something dangerously close to a smile. "This flaw," she says, "is deliberate." "Oh, absolutely," Dionysus grins, not helping. "Intentional chaos. A classic design choice." Zeffirella claps her hands. "We shall call it a sacred deviation." Mellanax nods solemnly, as if this is a thing he's always believed. And suddenly, the marble columns shimmer and bend, not collapse, but curve inward like petals opening. The space is still beautiful, still balanced, but now, softer. Warmer. The breeze returns, and the tree lifts its branches, no longer pressed into constraint. You breathe in deep. Somewhere, a bell chimes, not from precision, but celebration. The tree begins to blossom, small fig flowers, unspeakably delicate, blooming not in a pattern, but in a rhythm. A rhythm that feels like laughter. And somewhere in the garden, life begins again. Not in lines. Not in symmetry. But in stories. You wander through the newly softened garden as dawn seeps slowly through the leaves, brushing gold along every curve and corner. The atmosphere has shifted, less rigid, more relaxed, like the whole place finally exhaled. Hera sits on a bench carved from cloudstone, watching her newly christened Axis arboreum. The tree sways gently, not in response to any wind, but to its own rhythm. You get the sense it's finally allowed to be what it always was. Still, Hera's not quite ready to admit defeat. "I maintain," she murmurs, "that intentional asymmetry is still a form of order." Zeffirella, lounging upside down on a trellis, replies, "Of course. And storms are just complicated hugs." Dionysus has declared the occasion victory over Design Day and is handing out fig tarts shaped like stars. One of them looks like a shoe. He eats it anyway. You wander into a new section of the garden you hadn't noticed before. It's quieter here, shaded by older trees. One's untouched by symmetry campaigns. Their branches are gnarled, their trunks dimpled with age. Some lean, some twist. And all of them seem wise. You rest your hand on one of them and feel a kind of pulse, not literal, not divine, just slow life. Trees do that. They hold time differently. And somehow, you get the sense that this whole mythological gardening fiasco has happened before. Many times. Because even in myth, perfection is a moving target. This part of the garden reminds you of ancient groves, the ones Greek philosophers loved to pace through while teaching. Plato had his olive trees. Aristotle had his peripatos, his covered walkway for strolling and thinking. Nature wasn't static for them. It was dialogue. Historians still argue whether those groves were formal or wild. Some say they were well-maintained havens of balance. Others insist they were practically mini jungles with scrolls. But everyone agrees they were places of thought. And thought, much like fig trees, rarely grows in a straight line. You sit beneath one of the elder trees and close your eyes. Around you, bees begin their sleepy murmuring. A squirrel bounces past with something that might be a crown. Shellos is nearby, half buried in moss, humming softly to a group of acorns. Mellanax is giving Frank a tour of his favorite bark textures. And then, somehow, you end up at Daedalus's botanical lab. It's not on the map, there was never a map. But your feet carry you there as though guided by myth itself. Daedalus, the great inventor, is not usually associated with landscaping. But this lab, tucked inside a greenhouse dome wrapped in bronze ivy, reveals a side of him few know. He's here, in a wax-stained tunic, tinkering with what appears to be a mechanical rose that sneezes pollen on command. "Ah," he says without looking up. "You've come to see the topiary automata." You blink. You're not sure what those are, but they sound like trouble. He leads you through rows of strange, twitching plants, a bush that dances slightly when no one's watching, a cactus with a moral compass, a topiary shaped like a goat that sneezes rhythmically. This, Daedalus explains, patting the goat, was my attempt to create a plant that expresses emotions. It's mostly hay fever. You nod slowly, unsure how much pollen you just inhaled. He continues, "See, the problem isn't growth. It's direction. Most people, especially gods, try to control it. They shape it, bend it, punish it. But real design isn't a force. It's a conversation. You think of Hera, blueprint in hand, wrestling nature into line. And then you think of Shellos, simply placing his flipper on the trunk and listening." Daedalus reaches into a drawer and pulls out a scroll. On it is a sketch, not of a perfect tree, but of a dozen almost trees. Each one a different version, a different story. Curved, tangled, flared, reaching, curling in on itself. "I never figured out which one was best," he says. "So I built all of them." He opens a nearby cabinet. Inside are tiny bonsai versions of the trees, each in its own glass case. Some look like dancers. Some like explosions. One looks uncannily like Dionysus holding a pizza. He smiles. Symmetry is nice. But surprise? That's where wonder lives. And truly, that feels like the lesson here. You leave the lab with your heart a little fuller and a mysterious seed in your pocket, which Daedalus insists is entirely safe and only mildly unpredictable. Outside, the garden continues its slow transition. The overly rigid rows are softening. The hedges have relaxed. Even Hera's prized floral grids now feature creative gaps that no one is brave enough to point out. You pass Dionysus reclining in a hammock between two perfectly uneven olive trees. "Hera's learning," he murmurs. "Poor thing." Then he tosses you a fig shaped like a spiral. "Eat it. You've earned a snack break." You sit nearby, nibbling on the figure. It tastes like warm sun and rebellion. And as the stars begin to rise again, still not quite aligned, still beautiful, you let your eyelids grow heavy. The garden breathes. The trees whisper. And the rhythm of nature, unmeasured and lovely, plays on. Later that evening, under a velvety sky scattered with stars that seem to refuse forming any tidy constellations, the fig tree that started it all stands quietly at the heart of the garden, older now, a little taller, and still delightfully unpredictable. You find yourself drawn back to it, feet crunching on the gravel paths that no longer insist on symmetry. The marble columns surrounding the axis arboretum are still there, but they've softened too. One leans slightly, another is chipped, and nobody seems in a rush to correct it. Hera is there, of course. Draped in moonlight, her robe glowing faintly like silver mist. She stands beside the tree, arms crossed, studying the wild little flourish that now curls out from the top like a defiant crown. "Do you know," she says, not looking at you, "that I once tried to design an entire forest where every tree was identical? A grove of perfect copies." You blink. "That sounds exhausting." "It was," she replies. "They all died." You sit cross-legged at the base of the tree, resting your back against its textured trunk. It's warm again, humming softly. The leaves rustle like they're whispering inside jokes. "You'd think I'd have learned," Hera continues, finally turning to look at you. "But gods are stubborn. This is not a side of her you expected to see. But it fits. Like a hairline crack in a vase that somehow makes it more precious." Zephyr floats by, upside down again, handing you a scroll she's illustrated in watercolor. It shows the fig tree mid-dance, limbs all out of place and loving it. "I call it reaching anyway," she says. "It's about forgiveness." You smile. The garden has become something new, not a monument to perfection, but a playground for possibility. Melanex strolls past, now with 2 francs. He says the second sprouted from the first during an existential crisis. They're both wearing hats. Shellos, meanwhile, is asleep on a sun-warmed rock, his flipper twitching in a dream. Probably about moss. And Dionysus? He's perched in a hammock with his feet sticking out one end and a picture of something dangerous on the other. He gives you a lazy thumbs up, then shouts across the garden, "Hey Hera! Admit it, you love the mess." She raises an eyebrow. "I tolerate the mess." "That's basically love," he mutters, sipping. As the stars drift higher, you lie back and stare at them. Some are bright. Some are dim. None are evenly spaced. And they are, without a doubt, perfect. You let your thoughts wander. About the ancient Greeks who built temples with calculated grace, and the artists who dared to make statues with a twist in the waist. You think about how balance can mean stillness, but also motion. How the most beautiful thing about the fig tree wasn't its symmetry but its refusal to stop growing. Historians still argue whether ancient people understood this paradox. Whether they loved order because they feared chaos, or because they saw in chaos a kind of order all its own. A divine unpredictability. You close your eyes and listen to the soft sounds of the garden at night, crickets tuning up, leaves rustling like laughter, a distant splash, probably Melanex falling into the lily pond again. You feel the tree breathing behind you. And then, from somewhere nearby, a soft voice, Hera's, says, "Perhaps I should let it be." You open your eyes. She's still watching the tree. Not with judgment now, but curiosity. Admiration, even. The kind of look you give something when you realize it has its own will, and that might actually be better than anything you could design. Zeffirella floats beside her and gently slips a flower into Hera's hair. "It looks better crooked," she says with a wink. Hera doesn't argue. She just reaches out, touches a twisted branch, and whispers, "Grow as you will." And with that, something shifts. The garden. Not just the fig tree, but the whole garden seems to stretch. Not outward. Not upward. Just freely. Vines explore where they like. Petals bloom off schedule. And it all works, somehow. You close your eyes again. This time, with no ruler, no chart, no expectation. Just rest. Above you, stars blink one by one. One flares. One vanishes. None apologize. And somewhere in the garden, a leaf curls exactly the way it wants to. When you wake again, if you ever really stop dreaming. You're lying beneath the fig tree, head resting on soft moss that somehow smells like warm honey and rain-soaked parchment. Above you, the branches sway gently, no longer constrained by invisible geometry but dancing instead to their own slow rhythm. Hera is gone. Or perhaps just unseen. What lingers in the air isn't her stern presence, but something gentler, a kind of truce between design and desire. You sit up slowly and stretch, noticing that the fig tree has grown again. Not dramatically, but confidently. A new limb curves outward, wild and proud, splitting into two twigs that refuse to point in the same direction. They look like arms raised in mid-laugh. As you wander back toward the main garden, the landscape reveals its quiet transformation. What was once a symmetrical marvel now feels like a living storybook, each corner with its own personality. The once mirror-image hedgerows now lean like friends whispering secrets. A row of rose bushes has rebelled completely, forming a floral zigzag that looks accidental but clearly isn't. You step past Melanax, who is building a tiny treehouse for Frank number 1 and Frank number 2. The house is lopsided, with a chimney shaped like a question mark. It's post-structural, he tells you, adjusting a crooked wooden beam. Frank likes irony. Shellos is awake again, slowly making his way along the edge of a reflecting pool. You join him, and he gestures one slow, purposeful flipper to the trees reflected in the water. Upside down, he says, but still whole. You nod. Shellos always knows what to say. Or not say. Further along the path, you encounter something new, a small shrine. Just a circle of stones, no plaques or offerings. At its center, a young olive tree grows sideways from the earth, as if mid-bough. Draped across one branch is a garland of dried herbs and crooked blossoms. You recognize Zeffirella's handwriting on a piece of parchment tied to the trunk. It reads, to the leaf that chose a different path. May you find sun where no one else looks. You stand quietly, unsure whether to laugh or cry. So you do both, softly. Nearby, Dionysus is reclining on a woven bench shaped like a banana. He's mid-toast with a passing butterfly and waves you over. You know, he says, if Hera really wanted to make the perfect tree, she should have made it out of wine bottles. You never hear wine complain about symmetry. He offers you a sip of something fizzy and vaguely plum-scented. You decline. You're already drunk on the garden's new freedom. It's funny, you think, how myths rarely tell the smaller stories. They remember the wars, the lovers, the punishments. But they often skip over the slow, awkward beauty of compromise. The quiet miracle of changing your mind. Of saying, I was wrong, without thunder or spectacle, just a leaf, curling toward the light. Historians still argue whether ancient deities had personalities or whether they were symbolic constructs, reflections of natural forces and human fear. But if Hera ever had a flaw, maybe it was this: the belief that she had to be right all the time. And maybe, just maybe, the garden softened her. Not by correcting her, but by showing her a new kind of symmetry, the kind that comes from imbalance working together. Later that day, you stumble across a new path. It wasn't there before, but now it winds between birch trees like a thread in a tapestry. Curious, you follow it. The further you go, the more the garden changes. Plants grow in unexpected shapes. Flowers bloom in spirals you've never seen. The ground isn't flat anymore, it dips, rises, tilts like it's remembering how to dream. You find a clearing. At its center stands a tree, not fig, not olive. Something ancient, unnamed. Its bark is patchworked with colors, like someone painted over every scar and crack with gold. Its branches twist into loops, loops into arches, arches into nothing at all. It makes no sense. And it is breathtaking. No part of it matches. No side balances. It's the opposite of everything Hera began with. And yet you feel more peace here than anywhere else. A plaque sits at the base of the trunk. It reads, "Perfection was the question. Growth was the answer." You sit for a long time. Maybe hours. Maybe days. Time is flexible in places like this. Eventually, you walk back to the garden's heart, past the reformed topiaries, the sleepy nymphs, and Melanax, now conducting a wedding ceremony between the two Franks. The officiant is a goose. You find Hera sitting again, this time beneath the Axis Arboreum. She doesn't look at you, but says, "It's still not symmetrical." You nod. But it's alive. She glances up. Yes, she whispers. And it's still growing. And for the first time, you notice, so is she. Evening glides in slowly, slipping across the garden like a velvet shawl. Shadows lengthen, stars blink back into their irregular posts, and the warm hum of peace settles over the crooked branches and gently sagging vines. You sit again under the fig tree, the one that started it all, and watch as fireflies begin to pulse in lazy syncopation. They don't line up. They don't need to. In the distance, laughter bubbles up like a spring. Melanax has tied streamers to the Franks, who now ride in a tiny walnut shell chariot pulled by ants. Shellos watches quietly, nodding once every few minutes like a very patient emperor. A harp strums somewhere near the lilies. Zeffirella has composed a new ballad, Ode to an Imperfect Leaf. It's 3 verses too long and ends with a rhyme about fungus, but the tree sways along like it knows the tune. Hera, meanwhile, has begun writing. Not decrees, not scrolls of rules, but poetry. Quiet, unsure lines scratched into the dirt with her finger. You happen upon one without meaning to, a perfect line cut through the green, but joy grew and slashed the spaces between. You pretend not to notice as she gently brushes it away when you approach. She's still Hera, after all. You offer her a figure. She hesitates, then accepts it. And it tastes sweet. There's a new mood in the garden now, one not of triumph or surrender, but of trust. Trust in the trees to find their shape. Trust in the roots to reach where they must. Even the marble walkways seem to curve slightly now, like they've loosened their belts after centuries of holding it in. It's strange to think that all of this came from one crooked branch. One tiny imperfection that refused to be pruned. And if you're wondering, yes, real ancient Greek gardens likely had a bit of both, order and wilderness. Historians still debate the exact layouts, the philosophical intentions, the extent of human control. But nature has always had its say. Always. Somewhere, Dionysus is using fig leaves as playing cards and losing a spirited game to a duck. He insists the duck is cheating. The duck refuses to comment. You meander along a path of flat stones, now slightly staggered, on purpose, maybe. A new sign has appeared beside them. It reads, "Please enjoy the irregularities." They were planted with care. You chuckle, then look up at the night sky. The stars twinkle, some close, some far, some dimmer than they should be. They don't trace any constellations, you know. But maybe they're tracing something else. A pattern too big to see. Or too simple. You find a quiet bench, one that doesn't quite face the fountain evenly. It's better that way. Zeffirella appears beside you with a basket full of odd-shaped fruit. "These grew on the fig tree today," she says. "None of them match." She offers you one shaped like a crescent moon and another like a duck's foot. You take the moon. "It's delicious," you say after a bite. Of course, she smiles. They're free-range figs now. A breeze rolls in warm, tired, a bit sideways. It touzles your hair and rustles the leaves like applause. The fig tree creaks, just a little, like it's laughing to itself. Behind you, Hera and Dionysus have, miraculously, not argued for several minutes. They sit beneath a vine-draped arch, sipping wine from mismatched goblets. She's even smiling. A little. You wonder if the tree notices. It probably does. Because it's still growing. Not quickly. Not loudly. But with quiet intent. Every knot, twist, and unexpected sprout is a sentence in a story only it can tell. And you? You're part of it now. Tomorrow, the garden might change again. Another sprig might go rogue. Another vine might try to hug a statue. But tonight, it's enough to sit here, under the sky, among these misbehaving plants, and feel like maybe the most beautiful thing in the world is something that almost makes sense. Morning arrives, not with fanfare or trumpet blasts, but as a soft light rolling across the garden like a sleepy yawn. The dew glistens unevenly on crooked leaves and lopsided petals. Somewhere, a rooster crows and then crows again, slightly out of rhythm, as if reconsidering the key. You stir under the fig tree, stretching limbs that have grown fond of mossy ground and unregulated shade. The garden is fully awake now, alive with birdsong and soft chaos. It no longer tries to impress you. It just is. And that's the most impressive thing of all. A group of nymphs skips by, weaving a garland that has absolutely no discernible pattern. They're giggling, of course. Every flower is different. Every thread a surprise. They call it chaos couture and insist it's all the rage in Athens now. Melanax, wearing a cape made from grapevine and a shoe he clearly borrowed from Dionysus, salutes you as he parades past on a caterpillar. Frank is now a duke, he says proudly. You decide not to ask which Frank. You wander through the newer parts of the garden, the ones still learning to unplan themselves. Some hedges are halfway into spirals. A few flower beds have gently overgrown their borders. One particularly rebellious tree seems to be growing downward for reasons unknown. Dionysus is coaching it. That's it, buddy. Gravity is just a suggestion. You reach the fountain, once the perfectly symmetrical centerpiece of the garden. Now, it's surrounded by asymmetrical stone benches and covered in creeping vines. One of the statues has been given a beard. It looks better for it. Nearby, Hera is seated on a curved swing made of silver threads. She looks different. Not messy, never that. But softer. Her robes are still flawless, but a strand of hair has escaped its braid, and she hasn't corrected it. Did you see the laurels? She asks you, motioning toward a small grove off to the side. You follow her gaze. The laurels have formed a kind of maze, an irregular one, with paths that double back, curve, and end in surprise benches or flowering alcoves. At its heart is a sundial that points nowhere in particular. It changes every day, she says. I let them decide. You raise an eyebrow. Hera? Letting go? She notices your look and offers a dry smile. A tree taught me. The one that refused to listen. You walk with her for a time. She doesn't talk much, and neither do you. Sometimes, the best stories in gardens aren't spoken. They're grown. As you stroll, you spot shallows meditating beside a stone shaped like a wave. The turtle opens one eye and says, "You have walked the spiral." You're not sure what it means, but it feels true. Zeffirella has built a swing from a bent olive tree, and now spins in wide arcs, composing poetry midair. You catch fragments. Let the branch lean. Let the leaf curl. Let the gardener rest. You pause beside a cluster of fig saplings. New ones. Dozens of them, all slightly different, some tall and thin, some bushy and bold, some growing sideways as though reaching for their own stories. You crouch and touch one. Its bark is soft, still forming. It doesn't yet know what shape it will take. Behind you, Hera speaks. They're not mine. Not anymore. You nod. They never were, you say gently. And that's when you understand. The garden was never about control. It was never about perfection. It was about participation. Dialogue. Relationship. A dance between vision and permission. You glance up at the sky. The clouds are back to their usual chaos, wisps here, lumps there, nothing matching. But they move. They live. You stretch out on a sun-warmed stone, feeling the hum of the earth below. The birds sing whatever they please. A breeze brushes your skin without asking permission. You don't mind. Because here, in this slightly crooked garden, this place of once demanded symmetry and now delighted in balance, you finally feel it, peace. The air is heavier today, not with heat or gloom, but with that special kind of weight that comes from stillness. From growth that's happened quietly, like a vine curling in the night. You sit beneath a twisted olive tree at the edge of the garden's far corner, a place few have wandered until now. It's peaceful here. A small stream gurgles unevenly over lopsided stones. Wildflowers peek out in no particular order, like a choir warming up before deciding on a key. This is the garden's forgotten end. Or maybe its beginning. Behind you, the main fig tree stands tall, still asymmetrical, still alive, and more itself than ever. Around it, life hums along. Dionysus has tied a scarf to a flamingo and is now teaching it to limbo under grapevines. Melanax is collecting oddly shaped acorns and ranking them on a scale of most emotionally complicated. Zeffirella is painting portraits of trees that don't exist yet. And Hera? She's vanished from the center stage. Not in retreat. Just in relief. You find her eventually, sitting beside shallows at a small pond. The turtle blinks slowly. Hera has removed her sandals, and her feet rest in the water, sending uneven ripples across the mirrored surface. She doesn't look at you when she speaks. They grow faster when I stop watching. You nod. Some of them grow differently when you stop, you say. Her lips press into a faint smile. Different isn't broken. Shellos nods so slowly that it takes a full minute to complete. There's a small fig tree near them. Just a sprout. 2 leaves. The stem leans slightly, not because of the sun, but because it wants to. And no one corrects it. Hera flicks a stone into the pond. It skips 3 times. Unevenly. Perfectly. She says, "Do you know what the hardest part is?" You shake your head. Letting something beautiful exist without controlling it. You think about that for a long time. About how gods, kings, parents, and perfectionists all suffer the same way, mistaking direction for love. Order for care. Rules for wisdom. But wisdom, you now understand, might just be the act of stepping back. You offer Hera a wildflower. It's lopsided, 1 petal smaller than the rest. She accepts it. You don't talk much after that. The silence is better. It's a silence that holds not the absence of noise, but the presence of everything else: growth, rustling leaves, quiet joy. The garden has entered a new phase. No longer striving to impress. No longer fighting itself. It's just growing. Some days faster. Some slower. Some days with fruit, some with bare branches. Historians still argue whether ancient mythologies ever allowed their gods to change. Did they evolve, soften, grow wiser over time? Or were they locked into their roles like statues? But stories like this, the soft ones, the forgotten ones, suggest something gentler. Maybe even immortals can learn. Dionysus certainly hasn't changed. He's currently performing a dramatic monologue to a patch of mushrooms and demanding applause. They do not comply. But even he seems lighter now. Less combative. Like his chaos finally met an equal in Hera's release. You pass a new sign in the garden, etched in rough handwriting. It says, "Garden no longer under construction." Still, please tread curiously. The ground is softer now, more uneven. Roots peek through the soil like ideas not yet translated. A bush has grown into the shape of a spiral that no one intended, but no one stopped either. You sit once more beneath the Axis arboreum. The tree leans in a direction that defies logic. A bird has made a nest in a crook that wouldn't have existed if Hera's original plan had worked. It sings a tune that meanders, never loops. And it's beautiful. You close your eyes. Let the breeze run its fingers through your hair. Feel the warm hum of earth that doesn't demand you to shape it, just to listen. The garden is awake, but at ease. And so are you. Today, the garden surprises you again. Not with grandeur or revelation, but with something far subtler, a silence so rich, so complete, it feels like music paused mid-note. You step barefoot along a stone path softened by creeping moss. The stones are uneven, but your feet find rhythm in their randomness. You breathe in deeply. The air smells like figs, pine, and the kind of sunlight that only exists in early morning dreams. Overhead, the sky is smeared with brushstrokes of soft cloud. No two the same. You smile. Even the heavens seem to have relaxed. You arrive at what used to be the garden's sacred center. Once a place of rigid ceremony, lined with symmetrical columns and compulsively spaced topiaries, it's now become something much gentler, a meadow. The columns remain, but vines spiral around them freely now, and small birds have built tiny, disorderly nests at their tops. In the middle of it all stands a new tree. It's not the original figure. This one is younger, scrappier. Its trunk bends like it's trying to remember a joke, and its branches twist upward like questions instead of declarations. A sign hangs from one of the limbs. It reads, "This tree is not finished. Please don't try to help." You sit beneath it, running your fingers through the long grass. A ladybug lands on your knee. It refuses to follow the stitching on your pants in a straight line. Good. Across the meadow, you spot Hera barefoot again, her robe pulled up slightly as she wades through a creek. She's humming. Just a little. Just enough. You wonder if the younger Hera would recognize herself now. She sees you watching and approaches, dripping water, a smudge of dirt on her cheek she hasn't noticed. "I replanted the laurels," she says. "This time, I didn't map them first." You raise an eyebrow. "They wandered," she adds with a soft shrug. "I let them." And somehow, that feels like the most divine thing she's ever done. Nearby, Zeffirella is organizing a poetry reading. The theme is plants that refuse instructions. Shellos is featured as a guest speaker, though he's only agreed to blink at select moments in between verses. Mellanax appears, now wearing 3 monocles and pushing a wheelbarrow of irregular pine cones. Frank III is elusive, he whispers conspiratorially. He's disguised himself as a concept. You nod solemnly. You've learned not to ask questions you're not ready to understand. At some point, you find yourself back by the stream. Its babble no longer insists on flowing straight. Small bends now shape its song, making it richer, warmer, deeper. You wonder if this is what Hera meant to build all along. Not order, not symmetry, but serenity. A garden that holds space for imperfection. One that breathes. Historians still argue about whether the gods were ever meant to reflect humanity, or if humanity used the gods to reflect itself. But in this garden, you're beginning to think that growth doesn't belong to one or the other. It belongs to both. Shared. Rooted. You lie down on a flat patch of moss. It's not level. One side dips lower than the other. But your back settles into it like it was made for you. Overhead, the leaves shift, casting odd-shaped shadows that dance across your skin. You close your eyes and let them move over you, unpredictable and kind. Something soft bumps your hand. You look down. It's a seed. Just one. Pale green. Nestled against your fingers like it chose you. You pick it up. No instructions. No design plan. Just potential. You tuck it in your pocket. Later, when the garden sleeps again and the stars curl loosely overhead, maybe you'll plant it. Not to make something perfect. Not even to make something beautiful. But just to see what it wants to become. Twilight seeps into the garden like ink in water. Slow, inevitable, beautiful in its blurriness. The hard lines of day soften. Shadows stretch and mingle. Colors deepen into quieter shades, and even the most chaotic vines seem to pause and breathe. You're sitting on a bench that someone, Mellanax, probably, moved slightly off-center. From here, the garden unfurls in glorious disarray, fig trees that lean into conversations, flower beds blooming out of sequence, ivy tracing its own spirals across old marble. And everything feels right. The original fig tree stands tall nearby. You notice a new branch reaching outward, lower than the others, like it's offering a hand. No symmetry. No hierarchy. Just invitation. You rise and wander slowly, letting your fingers brush leaves and petals as you go. Each one different. Each one alive. You come upon Dionysus sitting in a hammock that's somehow made of ferns. His hair is tangled with twigs. There's a fruit in his hand shaped like a teardrop, though he insists it laughs when you bite into it. Funny thing about growth, he says, not looking at you. You can't schedule it. You just make space. The rest takes care of itself. He bites into the fruit. It giggles softly. You leave him there, half asleep, wine goblet balanced on his belly. Farther along, you stumble across a new tree planted in a cluster with others. Some straight, some bending, one that curls into itself like a question mark. A small sign reads, "This grove was planted by the uncertain. May their questions always bloom." A breeze rustles through. The trees shift gently, not in sync, but together. Nearby, Zeffirella is teaching young nymphs to paint with mud. Chaos is just color in disguise, she says as she smears a lovely brown arc across a canvas shaped like a shoe. You pass the turtle shallows again, who is, no surprise, sitting exactly where he was yesterday. Or maybe he never stopped moving. Maybe time just rolls differently around him. You sit beside him in silence. Eventually, he speaks. The garden breathes better now. You nod. So do I. He closes his eyes. That means something like yes. From here, you can see the entire garden, the order that once ruled it now replaced by rhythm, intuition, softness. Paths have curved. Fountains gurgle in unexpected pulses. Even the birds seem to chirp offbeat, and it sounds like joy. Somewhere nearby, you hear the plunk of a fig falling into a fountain. Then another. The rhythm is wrong, but it's perfect. You remember the seed in your pocket. You pull it out. Still smooth. Still silent. Still full of mystery. You don't ask it for promises. You don't demand it grow a certain way. You simply dig a small hole there, beneath a bent olive tree, and press it into the earth. The soil hugs it. Maybe it will grow crooked. Maybe it will grow tall. Maybe it will split in two and dance. You'll let it decide. As you sit there, dusk folding over the garden like a favorite blanket, you hear soft footsteps behind you. It's Hera. No robe. No staff. Just her. She crouches beside your newly planted seed, presses two fingers to the dirt, and whispers something too quiet to catch. Then she stands, brushes off her knees, and offers you a tired, genuine smile. You did it, she says. No, you reply. It did it. She glances around at her former domain. I tried to make it perfect. You made it sacred. She exhales, long and slow. Then, pointing to the crooked olive tree, she adds, that one still bothers me. You laugh. She does too. You sit together, the seed tucked safely in the ground, the garden breathing its slow, crooked breath all around you. You don't know what will grow next. But you no longer fear it. Night has taken hold of the garden now. Not as a blanket to smother, but as a velvet hush, softening the edges, deepening the colors. The stars blink through layers of leafy branches, some sharp, others curled like sleepy fingers. You lie beneath the old fig tree once more, the one that taught everyone how to stop trying so hard. The garden feels slower now. Not tired, just deeply content. Even the birds have settled into offbeat lullabies. Crickets chirp like tiny typewriters composing poems only they can read. You watch the branches above you, each one growing in a different direction, tangled and truthful. No plan. No pressure. Just presence. You turn your head and spot Hera, walking alone through the grove of newly planted trees. She moves differently now, less like a queen passing judgment and more like someone searching for a breeze. She stops beneath one particularly rebellious sapling whose trunk twists like a question mark. With a fingertip, she traces its spiral, not to correct it, but just to feel where it begins. Then she looks up at the sky and sighs, not in frustration this time, but in quiet surrender. She leaves a small stone at the base of the sapling, then walks on. You smile. You never thought you'd see the goddess of order find comfort in such crookedness. A few moments later, Dionysus tiptoes by wearing socks made from grape leaves. He's humming a lullaby to a bowl of figs. He pauses, grins at you in the moonlight. She's doing better, huh? He whispers. She's learning. He nods. You know, chaos doesn't mean mess. It just means uncharted. He twirls once, then exits behind a curtain of vines that part for him and immediately knot themselves again after. You hear Zephyrella's voice from somewhere near the rose bushes. Let it bend, let it break, let it bloom in its own wake. She's writing again. This time with a feather dipped in moonlight. Melanax tiptoes past carrying a tiny hammock made of snail shells. You think he's built a spa for Frank III. You don't ask. The garden has become a mosaic of personalities, branches, and wild ideas. No two corners are alike. Every shadow hums with a different tune. Some flowers bloom out of season just to see what the fuss is about. And yet, somehow, it all works. You lie there, hands behind your head, watching clouds drift by in crooked trails. One looks like a spiral staircase. Another like a goat wearing sunglasses. You're pretty sure that's Dionysus doing. You think again about the seed you planted. Somewhere out there in the dark earth, it's resting now. Waiting. Maybe dreaming. No rush. No plan. Just possibility. Shello settles beside you, emerging from the pond like a drifting stone. He doesn't say anything this time. Just offers you a fig shaped like a question mark. You take a bite. It tastes like starlight and laughter. The fig tree above you creaks softly as if shifting in its sleep. You imagine its dreams, wild leaves, impossible branches, a sky that never asks for balance. Hera sits not far away, sketching again. Not blueprints, but doodles. Leaves, spirals, stars. One of them looks suspiciously like your seed. You breathe in deeply. The air smells like nighttime soil and flowers that didn't ask permission. And then, from somewhere deeper in the garden, a new sound. The tiny crack of something beginning to grow. You don't move. You just smile. Let it grow. Let it twist. Let it find its own sky.